is a teaching message by Pastor Forrest Hill, founder and pastor of Church of the Living Water, Austin. Now, here's Pastor Hill with a life-changing message.
Now, as we move on, what we are looking at is, now I want you to listen to this, because sometimes we take things for granted. We get a lot of things here that we teach that some places don't even hear. I recently had a conversation with a young lady, and her questions were pertaining to the law and grace. And she was a little confused. Some people living by the law, other people are living by grace. She didn't understand the purpose of the Ten Commandments, why under the New Testament, living by the ceremonial code of the Old Testament seemed to be wrong. Now, when I say ceremonial code, that means everything that they did to have their sins covered for just a year. Okay? There's a ceremonial code, and then there's a moral code. Now, the moral code stays with us whether we're under the old or new covenant. You with me? That means that there's a certain place that we should be in our life morally and live morally, right? People say, I'm not under the law no more. That means you can lie, but the New Testament say, lie not one to another, seeing that you put on the new. What? Lie not one to another, seeing that we've put on the new man. That's the moral code, right? So I went to great lengths to explain to her what the ceremonial code was, why we are no longer under it, and it was something new for her. So, you know, when I go to certain books in the Bible and I teach from them, I think it's because it is necessary. We need to understand what's taking place so we'll know what it is that we believe in. I don't think that we should spend Sunday after Sunday being sermonized and entertained, and so we can feel good. I think we should know what it is that we believe in. And she just didn't know. And I don't fault her for not knowing, you know, but now here's my problem. If I'm eating at a place and the food is consistently bad, I'm through. Actually, listen, we went to a seafood restaurant and I ordered a steak. And I wanted the steak, well, if it's on your menu, that means that you know what you're doing. Or at least you should. And I ordered the steak medium. Now, I don't want no medium well steak, and I don't need no steak well done. I would rather it be medium rare than medium well. And they brought it out to me medium well. And I sent it back. And they brought it back rare. And I sent it back. And they never got it right. Now, this place has good seafood, but they can't do steaks. I said, if I come back here, I'll never come here to eat a steak. You with me? When I go to a church, I got to be fed. If you can't feed me, I'm not going. I don't care if grandma went, great-grandma went, and they all buried in the back. When I go, if I got an issue, I'm going to dig it up and take them with me. But we're not sitting there where I can't be fed. And some people, you know, they're not fed and no one is telling them the truth, but they'll stay there and then they want to hassle me. When I say hassle me, listen to this. You're a pastor. You're a brother in the Lord. You should help me. I'm like, you should get off your behind and go seek the word. If you're not being fed, if you can't sit down with your pastor and get some understanding, something's wrong. You know, I'm just not here to answer. I'm not the Bible answer man. It's not what I do. You with me? You know, and so that's why we teach the way that we teach here. That's why I do what I do. I got to give you, for example, I'm setting you up with Genesis. I'm giving you a lot of background information so that when we come back to the New Testament, we can understand why the Jews believed the way that they believed. It's based on these things. Rather than taking a passage of scripture and not understanding all that, maybe something that Jesus said. I heard a preacher say this, and it disturbed me. They were in John 15, where Jesus said, I'm the vine, ye are the branches. He said, my Father's the vine dresser. All right? And he talked about bearing much fruit. And then she immediately ran to the term fruit and said, that's harvest. The fruit is harvest. And I'm like, well, no, that's not. Harvest is a buzzword for those who sit up under prosperity teaching. It's a buzzword. I got something coming in for me. But that's not what Jesus meant. And I believe this, that we need to get to the whole conversation that Jesus had, or we're going to misunderstand it. Right? And so in that passage of scripture, he said, I am the vine, ye are the branches. He said, if you abide in me and I in you, you bring forth much fruit. He said, herein is the Father glorified, that you be my disciples. You remember that, reading that in John 15? Well, it's real simple what he means. We can become fruitful because we abide in the vine. A branch has no use in a tree except for bearing fruit. The fruit that we bear comes from the vine. What's ever in the vine will be on the end of our branches. He's talking about character and nature. He's not talking about money and things and stuff. The Lord never taught nothing that you can't find the foundation of in the Old Testament. Never. So we have to teach certain things that don't seem like they mean anything to us until we get over to the New Testament. Now here's why. The Old Testament is the New Testament concealed. The New Testament is the Old Testament revealed. So in the Old Testament, God wasn't revealing everything. Under the New Testament, he was showing us all things. So we need to know what's been said. Now, in this 22nd chapter of Genesis, we may mention last week in verse 1, it says, and after it came to pass, after these things, that God did tempt Abraham. After these things is approximately 22 years. I would say 20 plus years. We can say it that way. Because Isaac was a child. But in chapter 22, Isaac is a grown man when this happens. Now I'm going to prove that to you. Even though there's a word here that would cause us to pause a minute and say, are you sure? The word here is lad. When Abraham said, I and the lad will go and worship and we'll come back to you. Right? Well, when I refer to my sons, those are my boys. But my sons are in their 30s. But they're going to always be my boys. I don't care how old they get. You with me? And so you have to understand some things, how they refer to things. But this is some 20 years later. Because you say, well, Pastor, how do you know? It takes time to develop the things in Abraham and in Isaac to do what they are about to do. Now, I'm going to tell you, all right? If Brother Martin told Tathier, I'm going to offer you as a sacrifice to God, I think Brother Martin had to fight Tathier. I would think so. I know I'd be ready to fight. Now you ain't killing me. But in this chapter, Isaac is okay with it. So there's something about this that Isaac understands. All right? Now listen. God's not going to tell you to do that to your child. He's already chosen a man to do what he wanted to do. This test is not yours. This is his test. Right? Verse 1. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham, and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, here I am. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. Now here's something else I just saw. I never saw that before, but I see it. When God called Abraham, Abraham recognized his voice and responded. Some of us do not respond to God's voice because we don't recognize it. And that's why we miss a lot of things. Something was trying to tell me, I'm like, you didn't recognize the voice. You let somebody else come along and tell you, well, it was your instinct. You let people that pose as the preachers of gospel tell you it was your instinct that was trying to tell you something. I'm like, no, your instinct you don't have. Men don't have instincts. Only animals. You're not an animal. You're a man. Are you paying attention? I heard a preacher say that, we have instincts. Something was telling me. I'm like, no. For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, they are the sons of God. That's something is God. And Abraham had developed a relationship enough with God that he knew when God spoke to him. You know what? Some of you will live and die and never know God has spoken to you. Never know that it was God talking to you. Even some of you, listen, God has got you down in your dreams and try to talk to you, and he still can't say nothing to you. You get up from a dream and forget what you dreamt. You just woke up. How did you forget that? And don't know his voice. Some of us don't know the voice. Listen, the difference between our flesh, our God, and the devil. Some of you are calling your flesh the devil, calling the devil your flesh, and ain't paying attention to God at all. But the Lord called the man by name, Abraham. You said, Pastor, would God call me by name? How do you say this to you so that you can understand? When it's God talking to me, I know he's called my name. Well, what do you mean? Well, if I said, Alva, does that mean I'm talking to you? No. When God is talking to me, I could be sitting next to Alva. I know he ain't talking to her. I sat in the room with her, and God has said things to me. I know he means me. I know his voice. He is very, very distinct when he talks to me. He says things that, listen, he talks to me about things that we've talked about in the past, or things we're going to talk about in the future, but he'll mention it to me. When people said the Lord talked to me, we think that that person has actually heard a voice. They didn't. They just knew it was God. And the reason why many of us don't know the voice of God is that we don't spend enough time with his word. My sheep hear my voice, another they will not follow. So I hear the voice of God in a lot of situations. I hear what the word has to say. You know, in our present political climate, I am hearing the voice of God, and I go back to the scriptures to see what it has to say about them. I'm trying to find out where we are and what has happened. See, I've read my scriptures. I see a lot of nations that are mentioned in the Bible about the end times. I just don't see this nation. And so my question has always been, what happens to this nation? And so as I watch what is transpiring in this nation, I go back, because I hear God, and I go back and look at the scriptures, and I see, well, you know, it seems like between this time and this time, something happens, and God don't even mention it. You understand what I'm saying? That's how I know he's talking to me. Things that I have read come to surface in my mind in the process of watching something else. Does that happen to you? That happens to me a lot. But we got an ongoing conversation. Me and God, we have an ongoing. You know, some people, they only talk to God when they need something, but we got an ongoing conversation. And my God ain't too busy for me to just talk to him when I want to, and I ain't too busy for him to butt in when he needs to say something. So you need to develop that relationship. So whatever Abraham was doing, God spoke to him. And he knew enough to say, listen, I am here. What does that mean? Whatever I'm doing, I'm dropping, because what you're about to tell me must be important, because you've never just wanted to say something to me without it being important. And he told him, take your son. Which one? Your only son. Now I want to read that again. And he said, take now thy son, thy only son, Isaac. How is Isaac his only son? Where's Ishmael? Isn't Ishmael Abraham's son too? But God don't count Ishmael for the seed. God is always speaking to Abraham from the promise. Never from Abraham's work of the flesh. That's how you know it's God. God ain't talking to you about the work of the flesh unless he's asking you to repent. He's not, there's no promise in your flesh. Are you understanding this? So he said, listen, he said, take now your only son, Isaac. Isaac is the son of the promise. He's the one. See, there's something here that we're not seeing that Abraham understood. Abraham understands that there's someone coming through Isaac. Remember what we read in the last chapter? The last chapter said, Ishmael shall not be heir with my son. Then Isaac is the only son that this promise is coming through. This is important because there's a lot of stuff out there. I hear a lot of people running around talking about they're Jews. And I'm like, maybe you are, maybe you aren't. But Isaac is accounted for the seed. So whatever you are, it doesn't matter. The seed comes through Isaac. So you might be Jew, but that don't mean that you got salvation other than through the seed of Isaac. God said Isaac was his only son. He's the child of the legitimate wife, not the illegitimate wife. I'm only talking about Isaac. All of your children are legitimately yours. You need to take care of them. Your name ain't Abraham. God chose Abraham to do the work that he wants to do. Abraham had to leave his father, his mother, his kindred, his country, and go to the land that God was showing. And that in Abraham, listen, all the nations of the earth would be blessed. Are you understanding me? And he said, now listen, he said, take now thy son, that only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. And Abraham rose early in the morning, and saddled his ass, and took his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up and went into the place of which God had told him. Now listen to what he did. He didn't struggle. He got up. I don't know what time of day it was he told him, but he got up early the next day. Now, what do you call early? Before the sun shines is early. If the sun is up before you, you didn't get up early. You may have gotten up, but you didn't. When it comes to God, you got to get up before the sun beats you up and get some things done. Right? Well, you should. Okay? And he goes forth, and listen, in his mind, it is Isaac that's the sacrifice. When did Abraham make up his mind to sacrifice Isaac? He made it up when God told him. You got to notice what God said. This is the child you've been waiting for years. He's your only child. But I want you to offer him as a burnt offering. Excuse me. So in his mind, Isaac has to die. And he gets up early to take Isaac to die. Are you paying attention? Here's why Abraham is called the father of the faithful. Because he trusts God above all things. And God is about to test his trust. Now, I'm going to tell you, some of you may have had that test and you've been taking it over and over and over again. Because you get to take it till you pass it. You with me? You don't even know which test it is, but God will test your faith. He'll test it to see if you're going to trust him to do what it is he's asking you to do. He'll test you. He tests this man. Listen, the purpose of testing Abraham was not that God would know, but that Abraham would know that God knew. It's one thing to know that or believe that you're faithful. It's another thing when you know God knows that you're faithful. That's another thing altogether. It's one thing to call yourself faithful. It's another thing when God tells you that you are. It builds a confidence in you. You're not afraid of anything. Even at the point of death, you are willing to even go through death because you know God's promise is forever faithful. Are you with me? So here's what we're going to see. In this chapter, we'll see a picture of God offering his only son on a hill in Palestine. Moriah is a mountain in Jerusalem. It is a set of mountains. I can't tell you that Abraham went to the exact hill where Jesus was crucified, but he was crucified on one of those hills. And this is a picture of Christ, being God's only son, being crucified for the sins of the world. That's this picture. Here's what Jesus said about Abraham in John 8 and 56. Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad. So then, this particular test is God showing Abraham what he's going to do in the future. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but there's something here that causes Abraham to rejoice in this whole situation. Abraham takes his son, he goes to sacrifice him. He tells his servants to stay here, and I think that's a wise thing, because his servants would thought, this old man had lost his mind. And then Isaac said, I see the fire, I see the wood, but where's the sacrifice? And Abraham said, Jehovah Jireh. God will provide his own sacrifice. Now let me help you. You understand some things. Jehovah Jireh means God will provide. The Lord will provide his own sacrifice. I know what we would like for it to mean, but that's not what it means. And Abraham is confident that in the future, whether he has to offer Isaac or not, God will provide a sacrifice. And Jesus said, he saw my day and rejoiced. He saw the day coming that the seed would come and provide a sacrifice to free us all. Remember where Genesis began. It began with Adam getting into bondage. Adam's life ended with a promise that God would release him from that bondage. And God shows Abraham that he would release him.
This has been a teaching message from Church of the Living Water at Austin. For more information about our ministry, please go to our website at livingwateraustin.net.